The roar of the engine filled the silence of the night as I drove down the desolate highway, the only company being the occasional flickering street lamp casting eerie shadows. I was heading home after a long day at work, exhausted and eager to crawl into bed. But fate had other plans for me that night. As the miles stretched on, fatigue began to weigh heavy on my eyelids. I rolled down the window, letting the cool night air slap my face in an attempt to stay awake. But no matter how hard I fought it, the drowsiness crept over me like a suffocating blanket. Suddenly, a figure darted out onto the road ahead, causing me to slam on the brakes. My heart pounded in my chest as I swerved to avoid the collision, the tires screeching against the asphalt. I came to a stop, breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through my veins. But when I looked back, there was nothing there. No trace of the figure that had nearly sent me careening off the road. I shook my head, chalking it up to exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. As I continued my journey, unease settled in the pit of my stomach like a stone. The darkness seemed to press in around me, swallowing the world whole. And then I saw it. A pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the shadows of the roadside. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light. But when I looked again, the eyes were still there, shining like beacons in the night. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as I pressed down on the gas pedal, eager to put distance between myself and whatever lurked in the darkness. But no matter how fast I drove, the eyes followed me, always staying just out of reach. Panic clawed at my chest as I realized I was being hunted, stalked by some unseen force that hungered for my soul. I drove faster, desperation fueling my movements as I prayed for the first glimmers of dawn to break the horizon. But the night stretched on, endless and unforgiving, as if time itself had frozen in place. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw it. A faint glow on the horizon, the promise of safety and salvation. I pushed the pedal to the floor, the engine screaming in protest as I raced towards the light. But as I drew closer, I realized it wasn't the dawn I was seeing. It was the headlights of another car barreling towards me at breakneck speed. I swerved to avoid the collision, my heart pounding in my chest as I braced for impact. And then, darkness. When I woke up, I was lying on the side of the road, my car a twisted wreck of metal and glass. I stumbled to my feet, dazed and disoriented, trying to make sense of what had happened. But the memories were hazy, fragmented, like pieces of a nightmare I couldn't quite remember. All I knew was that I had escaped, by some miracle, from whatever horrors lurked in the night. But as I drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't escaped at all. That the darkness was still out there, waiting for its next victim to stray too close to the edge. And I knew with a cold certainty that it was only a matter of time before it came for me again. The night stretched out before me like a vast expanse of darkness, the only illumination coming from the dim glow of my headlights cutting through the blackness. I had been driving for hours, the monotony of the road lulling me into a trance-like state. But as the miles ticked by, a sense of unease began to gnaw at the edges of my consciousness. It started as a subtle feeling, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, but soon escalated into a full-blown panic as I realized I was lost. I glanced at the GPS mounted on my dashboard, only to find it flickering erratically, unable to locate a signal. I cursed under my breath, feeling a surge of frustration and fear rising within me. How had I strayed so far from the familiar path? As I continued to drive, searching desperately for any signs of civilization, I noticed something strange ahead, a road I didn't remember seeing before. It stretched out before me like a ribbon of darkness, twisting and turning through the barren landscape. Curiosity mingled with dread as I approached the unfamiliar road, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. But I had no other choice. I couldn't stay stranded in the middle of nowhere forever. I turned onto the phantom road, the headlights casting long shadows that danced across the asphalt. The air grew thick with tension, the silence broken only by the steady hum of the engine. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I saw them. Figures standing at the side of the road, their faces obscured by the darkness. I squinted, trying to make out their features, but they remained nothing more than vague silhouettes in the night. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest as I drove past them, their eyes following me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Who were they? What did they want? But before I could dwell on the thought any longer, I heard it. The sound of laughter echoing through the darkness, high-pitched and manic. I froze, my blood turning to ice in my veins as I realized I was not alone on this road. I pressed down on the gas pedal, the engine roaring to life as I raced away from the laughing shadows. But no matter how fast I drove, they seemed to keep pace with me, their laughter growing louder and louder until it filled my ears like a deafening roar. Panic consumed me as I realized I was trapped, a mere plaything for whatever malevolent force lurked in the darkness. I screamed, tears streaming down my face as I prayed for a way out of this nightmare. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I saw it. A faint glow on the horizon, the first glimmers of dawn breaking through the darkness. With renewed determination, I pushed the pedal to the floor, the engine roaring in protest as I raced towards the light. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced the night sky, banishing the shadows once and for all, I felt a sense of relief wash over me like a warm embrace. I had escaped the clutches of the Phantom Road, but the memory of that night would haunt me forever, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness. The night was thick with fog as I navigated the winding country roads, the dense mist obscuring my vision and casting an eerie glow over the landscape. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white as I strained to make out the road ahead. With each passing mile, the fog seemed to grow thicker, swirling around my car like a living, breathing entity. I glanced at the GPS mounted on my dashboard, hoping for some sign of a familiar landmark, but it remained stubbornly blank, unable to penetrate the dense fog. As I rounded a bend in the road, I saw something strange ahead, a mirror lying in the middle of the asphalt, its surface reflecting the dim light of my headlights back at me. I frowned, wondering how it had ended up there, but before I could give it much thought, I heard a voice. A whisper carried on the wind, barely audible over the sound of the engine. "Turn back," it said, the words sending a chill down my spine. But I ignored it, pressing on through the fog, determined to find my way home. But the voice persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing mile. "Turn back," it urged, the words echoing in my ears like a sinister refrain. I shook my head, trying to block out the voice, but it was no use. It seemed to be coming from all around me, surrounding me like a thick blanket of dread. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I saw it. The reflection of my own car in the mirror, driving towards me from the opposite direction. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched in horror as the reflection drew closer and closer. But as it neared, I realized something was horribly wrong. The reflection was not an exact copy of my car, but a twisted, distorted version, like a funhouse mirror come to life. And behind the wheel was not my own face, but the face of a stranger, twisted into a grotesque parody of a smile. I screamed, the sound lost in the fog as I threw the car into reverse, desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding before me. But no matter how fast I drove, the mirror car stayed right on my tail, its headlights glaring in my rearview mirror like the eyes of some malevolent creature. Panic consumed me as I realized I was trapped in a never-ending loop, doomed to drive these haunted roads for all eternity. And as the fog closed in around me, swallowing me whole, I knew that I would never escape the mirror road, a prisoner of my own fears forevermore. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale glow over the dense forest that flanked the winding road. I drove with caution, the thick canopy of trees casting long shadows that danced across the asphalt. As I navigated the darkened road, a sense of unease settled over me like a suffocating blanket. It was as if the very air around me was alive with whispers, the sound barely audible over the hum of the engine. I shook my head, trying to dispel the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of my stomach. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing mile. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw her. A woman standing at the side of the road, her face hidden in the shadows. I slowed to a stop, my heart pounding in my chest as I rolled down the window to speak to her. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear. But she didn't respond. Instead, she stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. And then, with a suddenness that sent a jolt of terror racing through me, she spoke. "Beware the woods," she whispered, her voice barely louder than a breath. "They hunger for souls." I recoiled, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Who was this woman, and what did she know about the woods? But before I could ask any questions, she vanished into the darkness, leaving me alone on the deserted road. I shuddered, a chill running down my spine as I realized I was not alone. The whispers grew louder, filling the air with a cacophony of voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white as I tried to drown out the sound. But it was no use. The voices surrounded me, closing in from all sides until I felt as if I would suffocate under their weight. And then, just when I thought I couldn't bear it anymore, I saw it. A figure emerging from the shadows of the forest, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I tried to drive away, to escape the clutches of whatever horror lurked in the woods. But the road stretched on endlessly before me, leading me deeper into the heart of darkness. And as the figure drew closer, its intentions clear, I knew that I was doomed. Trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape, a prisoner of the whispering woods forevermore. The night was heavy with fog as I drove down the desolate highway, the only sound the steady hum of the engine and the occasional thump of my heart echoing in my ears. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was well past midnight, and I was the only car on the road. As I rounded a bend, I saw it, a toll booth looming out of the mist like a ghostly apparition. I frowned, puzzled by its sudden appearance. I didn't remember any toll booths on this stretch of road. But as I drew closer, I realized something was terribly wrong. The toll booth was old and weather-beaten, its windows cracked and its paint peeling away in long strips. And standing behind the counter was a figure, a man hunched and shrouded in darkness. I slowed to a stop, my heart pounding in my chest as I rolled down the window to speak to him. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear. The man didn't respond. Instead, he reached out a gnarled hand, beckoning me forward with a silent gesture. I hesitated, a sense of unease settling over me like a heavy weight. But before I could make a decision, the man spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "Pay the toll," he said, his words sending a shiver down my spine. I frowned, reaching for my wallet to retrieve some cash. But when I looked back up, the man was gone, vanished into thin air like a wisp of smoke. I blinked, my heart racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Or had I stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined? With a sense of foreboding, I reached into my wallet and pulled out a handful of bills, tossing them onto the counter of the toll booth. But as I waited for some sign of acknowledgement, I realized with a sinking feeling that nothing was going to happen. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I heard it, the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I turned, my breath catching in my throat as I saw the figure standing in the middle of the road, blocking my path. It was the toll collector, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent light as he advanced towards me. I slammed on the gas pedal, my heart pounding in my chest as I raced away from the haunted toll booth, desperate to escape the clutches of whatever horror lurked in the night. But no matter how fast I drove, the toll collector stayed right on my tail, his presence looming over me like a dark shadow. And as the fog closed in around me, swallowing me whole, I knew that I was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The road stretched out before me, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkness of the night. I had been driving for hours, the monotony of the journey broken only by the occasional flickering streetlight. As I rounded a bend, I saw it. A gas station standing alone at the side of the road, its neon sign flickering ominously in the night. I frowned, puzzled by its sudden appearance. I didn't remember seeing any gas stations on this stretch of road. But as I drew closer, I realized something was terribly wrong. The gas station was old and decrepit, its windows boarded up and its pumps rusted and forgotten. And standing in front of the building was a figure, a woman, her face hidden in the shadows. I slowed to a stop, my heart pounding in my chest as I rolled down the window to speak to her. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear. The woman didn't respond. Instead, she simply pointed towards the gas station, her movements slow and deliberate. I shuddered, a sense of unease settling over me like a heavy weight. But despite my misgivings, I found myself drawn towards the abandoned building, the pull of curiosity stronger than my fear. I stepped out of the car and approached the gas station, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. As I reached the entrance, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door. What would I find inside? And did I really want to know? With a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the air thick with dust and decay. The interior of the gas station was dark and musty, the shelves empty, and the floor littered with debris. But as I explored further, I realized that I was not alone. Figures lurked in the shadows, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light as they watched me with silent intensity. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The gas station was haunted, its walls tainted by the echoes of past horrors. With a sense of urgency, I turned and fled from the gas station, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the darkness as I raced back to my car. I slammed the door shut and peeled away from the abandoned building, desperate to escape the clutches of whatever evil lurked within. But as I drove away, leaving the gas station far behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left a part of myself behind in that forsaken place. And as the night stretched out before me, endless and unforgiving, I knew that the horrors of the abandoned gas station would haunt me forevermore.